Hey everyone, and welcome to Reading Crossbow. My name is Lana, and I'm here with my co-host Rob.
Hello, Lena, and hello to all of the viewers watching. As usual, I'm excited to talk to you about a book this week, and this is my book this month, which is Godkiller by Hannah Kaner. And this is a very different book for us. For one, it's on the small side. We've been doing a lot of these giant books lately, and I'm this was a quick read.
It was unexpected, yeah, because we have had such big books lately, and I'd only seen kind of the cover of it when I ordered it off Amazon. And so I was just thinking, oh, and plus it kind of looks YA to me. I said that in our last episode. So I was expecting like a hefty book. And so when this came in the mail, I was like, ooh, easy read. But it actually took me a while. So deceptive, Rob. Very deceptive.
Yeah. So I guess just to get started, I'll just give a general idea of what this book is about. The book is actually has four point of view characters, and the title character, the God Killer, her name is Kissen, and she is a Vega, or God Killer is her job title, and it is her job to hunt down and kill these primordial, wild gods that just come into being out in the world. And that's a pretty interesting job title, and really the kind of hook that got me interested in selecting this book in the first place. So Kissen actually meets a god that she can't kill, and that is Skedi, or I think it's like Skedieth or something like that. That's how it's pronounced. And he is a god of white lies, but she can't kill him because he's somehow, in a process she doesn't understand, is tied to a human girl. And so her mission is to basically take this girl to a city where there's lots of wild gods and see if one of them can figure out how to break this girl and this god, apart in order to kind of save them both, because gods are outlawed in this world. We do have a fourth point of view character, which is a knight of the realm, or now that he's retired, a baker. And he joins them on this journey to find the gods. And it was a really kind of interesting tale. For the most part, follows the kind of trope of a journey story, a popular fantasy trope. What do you think?
It was definitely unique. I will say that. So, good summary. I typically dislike divine magic. We've talked about that a lot on the show. Any of you new here, Rob likes to pick grim dark books. I like to pick romantic fantasy. Typically, my books have like a different kind of magic, spell magic or elemental magic, less divine magic. And I'm getting this more in your books, and I tend to not love it. But this one, I know we're going to get into our likes, threw me for something else, and it was enjoyable. So yeah, fun, interesting, unique read.
Okay. So before we get into any sort of criticisms, what did you like most about this book? What was your favorite part or favorite character? What really stood out to you as being the best part, and what you'd kind of want to sell to other people?
Little tough because some of the best parts are also part of the worst parts. I feel like I've said this before. Like I have like multifaceted critiques here, but really one of the best parts was how broken the characters were, in a good way. Because the main character Kissen, the God Killer, and she literally kills gods. There, and by the way, there's wild gods, there's new gods, there's old gods. It's very interesting and very well described. Well, she's gone through a traumatic life experience, and this has left her very scarred up. It's a little unclear in the book to me, at least. Maybe I misinterpreted it. At first, I thought she was missing a leg, but then it seemed like she still had her leg, but then only part of her leg. And because you can see it and it's all kind of scarred and matted up. But essentially, she's got like a prosthetic leg, however much of her leg's remaining. And this is interesting to me, very interesting to me, because this part of the story is told over time. You don't get this in the beginning when you first meet her. It's not like, oh, she gets off her horse and I got to adjust her legs. She's just an amazing fighter. And you get it later, like little bits and bits of the story as it comes along. And I just loved that broken part of her, but she was still so whole and so strong. And several of the characters are like this. They are not perfect at all, but they're not perfect in a way that is, I think I say, more physical for most of them, which is interesting to me. Some of them broken on the inside too because of trauma. But I don't know, it didn't feel, it felt natural.
Yes.
I don't know how to describe that.
Yeah.
It's nice.
I would agree. I think the characters and how flawed, they didn't have like the personality flaws that I often like in a book.
That.
They all have other kinds of flaws. Like Kissen, she is an amputee. The knight Elo, he obviously has suffered some sort of almost like a PTSD from the last war, or even just lost his faith in his own king, his best friend, because he walked away after the war and basically just became a baker, despite the fact he was like the grand general of the army. And so all of these characters have something kind of, broken, but it doesn't hold them back. It's something that helps propel them through this story. And I also really liked that about these characters.
Yeah, it was nice. It felt like, I loved that it wasn't that what you talked about. How like these flawed characters for whatever personality reason. It was none of that. They literally had physical and personal trauma that just affected who they were over time. My other things, I'm just going to name two. So that was the first part. The second thing I loved about this book was actually the gods. That was also very natural. So I think I might use the word natural a lot, is because I think it felt interesting to me that there was old, wild, new. We read books and it's usually old gods or one god or something that feels more like a traditional faith. But this was all over the freaking place. And it almost made sense as to why some types of cultures might worship a certain god and why others might not. And it was more based off of need. So there's like a fertility type of god. There's even a little mouse that they find that's a god. I mean, it's just so interesting. And there's these shrines built to these gods. And the gods basically feed off attention or feed off of love for them. But that love or need can come from all sorts of things. Maybe you need to be strong. Maybe you need to be beautiful. There's gods for all of these, and they're all over the place. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of gods. It's a little unclear. And some are so old that they're very, very powerful, like the god of the sea in this book, who's a big portion of this book, or the god of fire. But the gods of kind of these little things, like they're innately, it's like, I think more wild, or the newer ones, or maybe they come and go. I don't know if when one god goes, if another one kind of replaces that need. I'm not sure. But it really explained a lot to me. And I think this is the first book, I'm going to say love, Rob. I'm actually going to say love, where I loved divine magic.
Yeah. Okay.
It was so good.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think for me, that stood out the most, the thing that I liked the most, was actually just the last act of this story. All these pieces and these seeds that had been building up throughout the story, they all just came together in just kind of the most action-packed, fun, exciting part of this story. That whole last third of the book is really, it was a blast, and I could not have enjoyed that section more, because like I said, it brought together all these kind of plot seeds that have been kind of building and slowly being revealed to the reader, as well as kind of gives you these kind of just awesome, badass moments when you see these characters like stepping up and doing cool things. And I really love that part of the book.
Yeah, it was cool. This Godkiller Kissen that we've talked about, she she has killed, we don't know how many gods, but it seems like a good amount. And she's basically kept these little trinkets from them over time. And each little god trinket or potion or dust, or sometimes you kill them and they turn to dust, and she collects that. And you can use them kind of against the other gods. So kind of in that final act that you're talking about, we get all these little vials and trinkets and things that she keeps in her god killing cloak on her. And she kind of uses them all, and it's fun. Yeah, it is a fun action packed moment for sure.
So with that, what did you maybe not like so much in this book?
All right, this one's a toughie. I did the number one thing. We'll start with the number one thing that I did not like, but it's kind of a toughie because I said earlier in the show, like, I kind of did like this about this too, but is it took a long time for some of these things to come out, which I don't think the mystery had to be withheld from you. So, for example, Kissen having the prosthetic leg, we get her backstory really early. It's in the earliest part of the book on, her family trauma, and basically her family's burned, essentially, and she gets burned up pretty badly.
Yeah, it's the prologue of the book.
Yes, exactly. So super at the beginning. We're not being too spoiler on that. We'll give a little spoilers in the show, but we're not going to make this so you can't read the book or give too much away. But it comes out much, much later, the severity of her injury. We get it a little bit. We definitely get it a little bit in the beginning because she gets hit with a sword or something in the leg and it kind of sticks. And that's the moment when I really realize, oh, she's what? And then it comes along more, and then there's like incredible characters that help her along this journey and even like put the leg together, which is cool. We get backstory on that. So great backstory here, but I just felt like some of that took too long to come out. And other parts of the story too just took too long to come out. And I don't feel like we needed to have an empty puzzle piece. And I'm trying to be cryptic about this on purpose, but it just felt like I don't know why I had these parts of the character so late. Because that kind of goes into the second part of something I didn't like, which is not feeling connected enough to the characters, especially in the beginning.
Okay.
I really struggled, and that made this book feel slow with even picturing these characters well in my mind. I wasn't getting enough of that personality that I needed, even though I had some backstory to see them like how I like to see them.
Okay. Yeah.
And did you see that, or am I like crazy on that?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. The first 2 chapters of this book are really, really good. And the last act of this book is really, really good. It's the in-between that, because it's largely a road story, a travel log, where these characters are just kind of bonding as they travel together. And while that should be the part where you really connect with these characters, I also would agree. I found the middle part of this book to be very kind of slow, and I struggled to really. I found my attention span often being sucked away. I was easily distracted while reading this part, the middle part of this book, because the characters, I just wasn't connecting with them as well. I mean, I was understanding the story and the reveal of information about this world, like about the gods and the cities, and as they passed through the world, I found to be very interesting, but the pacing definitely was uneven throughout the course of this book. Like I said, the very beginning and the very end were very action-packed and very exciting, and the middle was kind of a slog, and that's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. I did have a hack though, and it got me through. Once this clicked, I really figured out what was going on. And I don't know if you'll get this, but you said something, I can't remember which book it was on, but where you said the character was like Arya Stark. And I didn't picture the character like that when I was first reading it, but when you said that, I was like, yes, they are. Well, in this book, I had a moment, and this is after another character, who we haven't really talked about yet, which is Anara, which is this child that Kissen runs into on her journeys. And the child also has, a newly traumatic past. And this child who's basically lost her whole family is learning to care for herself and learning how to, hunt for herself and kind of growing into this new person that she's going to be. In that moment, Like, I could not identify with the characters until I pictured her as Bella Ramsey. I don't know if you could see it, but from Game of Thrones,
Okay.
she's like 10 in Game of Thrones, and she suddenly is like the queen, and she's got this stern face, and she just like owns it. And arguably, when that season, when Bella Ramsey came out in Game of Thrones, was the best character. Fantastic. Now, hang on here with me.
Okay.
Kissen is a female version of the Hound.
Yeah.
Because she's all scarred up. It made sense to me. If we have Bella Ramsey as Inara and Kissen as the Hound, this story just flows.
Okay. That's it's a very interesting analogy, and I'm not going to say you're off base. So
Okay.
now, if you were to say, who is this book for? Like, what kind of reader would you recommend this book to?
Okay, who is this book for? I think that's kind of a tough one, but I'm kind of leaning in the word like Celtic mythology. I get some like pagan feel on some of this, and worshiping different gods, and just interesting, and like especially the bits about fertility. I think about like pagan rituals with that, and I also think like witchcraft too a little bit. I think it's just so interesting. I got some vibes in this book. I watched a lot of Outlander, and I promise I'm piecing this all together. But like when the witches are dancing in the circle, and just, I don't know, I feel like if you like that kind of feel, and different gods, and praying for different outcomes, and fortune and luck, even, like, this is interesting. Like, I don't feel like you have to like fantasy. I don't feel like you have to like grimdark. There wasn't like crazy ton of grimdark to me in here, but I think that if you like any sort of mysticism, this is interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. For me, where I would say is people who like low fantasy or the sword and sorcery type of book, because magic is not in the forefront of this. It's there, but because people don't use magic, only the gods use magic, you have to ask the gods for favors. Basically pray to them and give them a sacrifice of some kind, and they will grant your wish. Well, that's the only real source of magic. And so we'll talk about it a little bit more when we talk about the magic itself. But I think if you're really into that kind of low fantasy sword and sorcery like Conan and Red Sonja, that kind of stuff, that was kind of the feels I was getting from this book.
Red Sonja, maybe some Lady Hawk, maybe like some old 80s
Yeah.
throwback. I'm also going to say, if you like Game of Thrones, then you might really like this book, because Game of Thrones wasn't just about the mostly humans in that book, like trying to vie for the throne. It was also about this other type of, creature that we weren't sure of throughout the series. And that is in this book too. It's a Game of Thrones, but also with the gods.
So one of the things that we can talk about this week is this book does have a map.
Does have a map, so we can show me the map and bring that up.
Funny enough, the map that this most reminds me of is the map from our last book, which is the vampire book. There's a lot of similar kind of feels I'm getting from this map. Do you get that?
A little bit. I have the paperback. You're going to think I'm so weird on this, but I get from anatomy class like a display of human muscles. Do you see it, or am I weird? It's the ocean. It looks like muscle tissue.
Okay. Yeah.
I the first time I looked at this, because the map is so small, I'm like, wait, is this like human? Is this anatomy class? What is this? But that sounds weird. People might not get it, but that's the first thing I saw.
This reminds me of two other books that we've covered, Swordcatcher and Dragon Rider, where basically they take certain things and kind of make them really big so you can kind of get a little bit of a feel of how it looks, or get an idea of where a place is. Now, almost the whole book just takes place in a small section on this map, but they're giving you kind of a wider regional, because some of the other places are referenced, like the Talisha is kind of referenced several times in this book as being the neighboring kingdom area. And I think that's where Kissen originally is from. And so they reference some of the other places, but they're just kind of giving you a broader world map, and then have these big supersized kind of representations of the area. So you don't really get any sense of scale, like how far things are apart or anything like that. But there's a lot of kind of flavor, I think, that you get from this kind of a map.
I knew you were going to say Sword Catcher. And Rag Picker King is our next book, and I've seen that map because it's been delivered to us both by now. Yeah, I knew you'd say that. You know what's interesting? I remember when we first rated the Sword Catcher map, I was like, no, I really like this map. But the more and more maps we see, the less I'm liking this style.
Okay.
I like understanding what the worlds look like. Like, I love the depictions. It's actually probably some of the best depictions of cities we've seen in terms of like how well the artist has drawn the buildings and such. Like, it's actually really beautiful. But I do find myself kind of longing a bit, as you said, for scale and for understanding like distances more, because there is some travel in this.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think last year me would have said this map was amazing. But this year me is not so sure that I like this anymore.
Yeah, I think especially because this specifically is a travel story where I almost kind of want to see, like, if you've seen like many of the Lord of the Rings maps, you can actually see the trail that the Fellowship follows. That's the kind of map I think I would rather have for this kind of story.
I think so too. And you know me, I like having the compass rose too. And we know that this, it doesn't say that this is our world. We don't have northeast, southwest, for example. We don't know that they have that. But I still just, as someone who loves maps and books, I just like to see that. So no scale, no compass. The ocean looks like musculature. I don't know. It looks like muscles. It's weird. I don't love this map.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and rate it. I think it's a 3 because I can't make it a 2. A 2's bad. This is good. It's fine, but I don't get a lot out of it. It's really pretty.
It is pretty, and so I'm gonna go with the 2 for myself. I think it's just okay. This is not good. We normally say a 3 is good and 2 is an okay. I think this is an okay. I do actually really like on the inside. Oh, really?
You're convincing me. I think it's a 2. I can't get over the ocean being weird. I can't get over it looking like that. And I can't, all the cities are kind of stacked on top of each other. Looks like a city border goes right into a city border. It is pretty. The cities are drawn the prettiest I've seen them, but it's not very helpful.
Now, you have the paperback, so I don't know if you have this in yours, but in the hardback, there is a really nice art on the inside cover. And it shows one of the locations they pass through, which is basically a city built on a bridge.
I am having serious FOMO. I am so mad at you that you have that book right now, and I'm kind of wondering if you want to trade these.
But yeah, when I saw that picture, I was like, that was a very inspiring picture, because it's right at the very beginning on the inside of the cover. And then I spent a good chunk of this book waiting for that moment to happen. And then it does happen. And I was like, that was pretty cool. You helped me understand that with that really good art on the inside. So
I'll look that one up. Are we to my favorite part?
It is your favorite part, and that is the spice rating. This is not technically a romantasy, but there is some spicy elements, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to start here. I was confused in this book to start. I almost decided to talk about this in the what I didn't like about this book, but I actually thought I'd save it for the spice reading because it makes more sense here. Which is that the very first pages, I was confused because she says her father falls in love with a god of the sea. I immediately thought that was a female god, because how would she be born? Like, it just was very confusing to me. Her father falls in love with the god of the sea. Well, I didn't realize that she he was already married, and she was already born of mortal blood. She wasn't like a half god, which is what I thought. It's just very misleading in the beginning, in my opinion. And then I didn't realize that the god of the sea was male, which doesn't matter to me. But like it took me a minute. I was like, wait. And so the book's very gender fluid. The characters go back and forth, and our lead character, Kissen, she prefers females. But she, as we talk about the spicy scene, will, she doesn't mind if they're male. And then there's some other parts too where it was just a little like confusing as to who liked who. And I thought that Elo, that's our knight in this story, I thought that he might have had a fondness for like the king in this story at some point, because that part was a little confusing too. So some parts of the book were just like not described well enough. And this is my issue with the author taking too long to drag out character details. Like it took me too long to determine that, for example, the gal who helps Kissen with her leg, I didn't get the feeling that there was a crush there, or she used to have a fondness for her or wanted to be with her. But that comes way later in the story. And I just like, that would have been nice to know then, because it would have made that connection with that character make more sense. So I promise I'm going to get into the spice rating. But this kind of all leads into it, because you want to, when you're looking for that in a book, which you know I do, I want to try to guess like which characters are going to, get together. And I wasn't sure. And I could have shipped more characters in my brain if I would have known there might have had a thing for each other. And the author saved it. Instead of giving those parts when he wanted it. I was mad. I was big mad reading this book about not getting the elements I wanted and not getting those connections. Fail. Big fail on Spice for me. And not because I don't care about which genders are who. Kissen can get it on with whoever she wants. She almost got it on with the barmaid, and I was super excited. That didn't happen. But they do get it on later. Kissen. Not with a girl. With a guy. Can we say who? Are we allowed to say that? I think we could say that.
It's up to you.
Yeah, I'm going to say it. Okay, you all had enough warning watching this. There's a little spoiler coming here. It's Elo. She gets it on with Elo. And you know what? This kind of reminds me of this trope in YA where it's Last Night on Earth. Actually, it is the Last Night on Earth trope, right? They're both just like, they could die tomorrow.
Yeah.
So they get it on, and it's fantastic. It's a great scene. It's rough, and it's quick. And I think that's just how it was. Good. What did you think?
I would also agree. I think as far as the romantic elements of this book, it was not clear throughout most of the book. In fact, I think the reader was given a lot of opportunity to make assumptions.
That's a good way to put it.
That turned out to not be true as far as like people's, preferences and that kind of stuff. But as I said, I don't think this is a romantic fantasy or romantasy, because that's not even a central focus of this story really at all. There just happens to be, a spicy scene in the book. And I think it was a good scene. It was, it was good. I guess for me, I'm going to say 3. I think it was a good scene. It was pleasant, not.
It was pleasant, Rob? Were you going to say it was pleasant?
Really don't want to.
Okay, then. Well, hey, we'll let the viewers assume, just like this book had us assume.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to give it a 2, because I was greatly annoyed throughout lots of this. And I'm still mad that we find out in the near the end that Kissen had a thing for this like gal who works on her leg prosthetic. And then that gal's with this other gal that's Kissen's friend. And also, you know what? I didn't mention this earlier, but like a lot of parents seem to be same-sex relationships. So it made me curious. Did you get this too? Like, where did the babies come from?
So they do make it very clear in the book that only one parent needs to actually claim parentage. In fact, they don't even have a concept of you have to be married, or you don't even have to declare who the other parent is in order to even be, granted like, oh, I'm the child of this noble person. As long as the noble person claims you, that's the only thing that matters. No one even has to know who the other parent is. And that fits with the, I guess, gender fluid nature of many of the characters. And So I think it's consistent in the world. Now, one of the things Kissen specifically mentions is one of the reasons why she tends to stay away from men is a fear of pregnancy.
Yeah.
Which is
true.
One reason why she prefers women most of the time is because she's afraid of getting pregnant.
But you said very clear, but I still, it wasn't clear to me. It was clear in the story of the nobility with Anara, because she doesn't know who her father is, but it wasn't a big deal. Like it didn't need to be claimed exactly as you said. But I thought that was more her scenario. I didn't get that with like the farmers' wives and such. It felt, I don't know, it could have been more explained. And again, it doesn't. Maybe some people don't need that explained, but because I like I said, I like to try to like put characters together and think who's with who, and I just didn't get to do that. Made me sad. But anyway, two. Spicy scene was great. The rest of it was meh.
Now, what about the magic? This is a book without really explicit magic system. Like, there's no characters using magic. There is a lot of magic in this world from these gods. So let's talk about it a little bit.
I think if I keep the magic rating in terms of divine magic only, I have a good grip on this. If I put this on a magic scale of like all the magics I've ever read, I think it won't be high. But in terms of magic rating for divine magic, I was very pleased with it. Like I said earlier, like this is high for me, top of my list on divine magic, because the magic was specific, and I just don't like floaty magic out there with no reason, super accessible, anybody can grab it and use it as long as they know the right words. That kind of thing just sort of bothers me. This was like each god has its own magic, and the older the god, the greater, and the newer the god, the less. The more wild the god, the more, I don't know, flavorful. It's interesting. And we also have the story of Skedi, who we haven't mentioned much, but he's this god who's connected to Inara. And we don't know why. There's a lot of unanswered questions in this book, and I'll get to that in the rating of the actual book itself. But it seemed all very specific to the gods, and the it could run out. We talk about that too. Is the magic limited? And the gods' magic is limited if their source of need is limited, or want. And so, like, magic can wane with gods. And that was like really clearly depicted with the mouse that we talked about, where she like thought about giving it this crumb or something. I can't remember exactly what the part of the story, but like the littlest crumb of like love or attention in this little mouse would have, whatever its magic was, would have been replenished. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting. As far as divine magic goes, I'm going to give this a 4. I was quite pleased. If I had to rate it with other magic, it would be probably more like a 2.
So for people who are maybe fans of like Dungeons and Dragons, the gods in this setting are a lot more like D&D gods insofar as like they have very specific domains. Like this is a god of this river. There's a god, Skedi is a god of white lies. There's many different water gods and fire gods, and there's actually one god that's mentioned, and she's a goddess of beauty. And so people would go to her and basically make sacrifices or try to pray to her in order to get her favor and get some sort of miracle from her. And what I found to be really great about this kind of thing is the gods are even extremely limited in what they can do. The god of beauty could basically make someone more beautiful, and if they're angry, they could maybe make someone less beautiful. But that's kind of the limits of their power. So some gods naturally have more power than others because they have a much cooler domain than the other gods. So like Skedi, the god of white lies, he appears as like a little flying jackalope, but he doesn't have a powerful domain. And so therefore he can't really do much, except he can kind of whisper to people and people will believe his little white lies.
It was very helpful, though. It was a very helpful skill. Like he could hide them by saying like, you can't see them, you don't see them, things like that. It was neat.
That was a fun part of that story. So for me, I actually really like this magic system, because the gods just, like Kissen mentions, like as she's killing one god, that she's like, it'll come back. There's going to be another god of this of this river system. A new one will form. It might even be literally the same god, but it won't remember anything. Like, it won't remember that she's already killed it before. It's just going to slowly come back. These are almost like the genius loci of like the Dresden Files, or like kami in like Eastern religions. These are very regional, geographically kind of based, deities, where they come into being based on belief and need. I didn't mention it earlier, but this is one of the things that I felt to be one of my favorite parts of the book, is just the way these gods and their magic system got revealed. So I'm going to go with a 4 on this one as well. And,
yeah. You reminded me of something when you said your favorite part. I kind of want to share like one of my favorite parts in the story, which is where they need to get in this inn and they kind of need to lie about who they are. So he helps them lie about who they are. And it's a palm reading moment. He says he's a palm reader and he has not gotten an offering before. Like, Sketty has never had a god offering. And so someone is trying to prove that, like, are you really a fortune teller? And so the girl's like, yeah, totally, put out your palm, but you need to pay up first. So when that silver comes across the table and Sketty sees it, he's like, because he's helping feed her the fortune. Like, he's telling her in her mind and she's giving the fortune. And what he like, it's like the Grinch when his heart grew 3 times too large or something. He's in her little satchel. He's hiding, but he actually grows. Now, he can grow and get smaller. It's like one of his things that he does. But like, he just swells up. I don't know if it's pride or need or what it is, but she says she felt like the seams on the satchel were going to burst. And that's when I really understood the transactional like necessity there between the gods and the humans. And I thought that was so cool. Standout moment.
And it is explicitly transactional. You have to basically pay. And the payment doesn't have to be a physical payment. It just has to be, you have to sacrifice something. So in this goddess of beauty, like the way she gets people to pray to her, she basically says they have to skip a meal. And that's what's required. And eventually, but that's how the gods become almost these dark things, is because they're like, oh, I asked these girls to skip a meal and I will make them more beautiful. But then they start skipping more and more. And it's basically almost causing like an anorexia, a mass anorexia amongst a whole village, because they're all skipping meals. City. And that's why
skinny models.
Yeah. And that's why you need these god killers to come and stop them, because they can't help themselves. They're tied to their domain explicitly. And I found that to be, one of the best parts of this book.
Yeah. 4 for sure on the magic, for divine magic. It was good.
Okay. So let's talk about the book itself. How do you rate this book? Is this something you would recommend to friends? Is this something that there is a sequel that's already out and a 3rd book on the way? So how are you feeling about this book series?
Well, I bought the second one because there was like a little deal on Amazon that day, and it was like buy 2 of them, and it was like $22 or something. And normally a book is more than that. So I was like, well, I guess I'll just buy both of them. So I have the second one. This first book for me was not stellar. Like I said, it started out super strong. I think actually you mentioned that, and I love like Kissen rolling off her horse and strolling into this bar and being this big ass god killer, and everyone knows who she is, and she's like commanding. It's fun. Her backstory's interesting. All their backstories are interesting, really. Every single character, I think, has a great backstory. Even like 2 travelers that are traveling together so that his wife can, get pregnant. Like, their story was cool. He can't bake his dumplings right. The baker helps him. It's just neat. There's a lot of great stuff in this book. But that whole middle of trying to really decide if I like the characters enough to follow on to the next book was a no. Until about the end, like you said. There's another thing with the book that makes me want to read it, interestingly, which is too many, like far too many holes. And I think that's because they will be answered in the second and third book, but it's bothersome to me to have them empty even after the first book. And I'm going to go back to one of the earlier scenes where Elo is traveling. He needs to basically go to the land. We didn't mention this, but like all the gods, not all the gods, but a lot of the gods were killed off earlier. Worshipping gods is banned in this kingdom. And so there's like this city of gods where that was destroyed. And people make pilgrimages to this city. So Elo needs to make a pilgrimage to this city to save someone he cares about, basically. That's his mission. That's why he's in this story. Well, he's in this bar to try to figure out his passage, right? He's trying to be like sly about it because you got to do all this under the table. They sneak people out on these pilgrimages. Well, there's like a gal at the bar and she's doing something interesting, and he realizes later on she's writing something in lemon juice. Well, later on we realize Anara's mom would write things in lemon juice, and this is all connected to kind of these rebels in the story. And I'm not going to go too much into that plot, but didn't really answer who that woman was. And for the largest part of the book, I'm finding myself wondering, is her mom really dead? Was that her mom in there? Because they read the lemon juice thing crossing to me was like, and it kind of answers, it kind of doesn't. And there's a lot of moments. I'm not going to go to every one of them. I just pulled out that specific one. And in that same part of the story, a curse is transferred easily, like with a touch. Whereas in other sections of the book, it seemed like curses took a lot more effort, or someone needed physically scarred, or you know what I mean? Like the person didn't even know they were getting cursed. And I struggled, Rob, because to me, these were sections that could have been wrapped and weren't. And it's odd. And I don't like that at all. I'm going to read the second one because I bought it, and I want them to be wrapped up, and they better do it in the second book because it wasn't done in the first book, but this all held me back. I'm borderline wanting to give it a 2 for that. But because of the epic parts of the story and where I think this could go and how much I liked the gods, it's a 3.
Okay. So for me, you hear about this, what they called the Gods War, that happened a few years ago at the beginning of the current king's reign. And actually, I think it just before his reign, he basically became king after the Gods War. And I found myself about midway through the book being like, man, I wish this was that book. That sounds like a really great story.
Yes.
Now,
100%.
Yeah, because I don't want a prequel now. I think it's spoiled enough that I'm not sure at this point I would want that. But if this book had just been that story, and then this book had been a sequel to that story, I probably would have been a whole lot more excited, because that story sounded really, really cool. We get the really neat parts about that at the end of this book, where you have this big epic moment. Unlike most of our other books, I feel like this is the most filmable.
Yes.
Like, absolutely. I
too.
think you could this is almost a screenplay. You could almost take this and just film it straight through. And I think it would actually be great. You have that great opening, almost a James Bond, like exciting type of opening to the book. You have an amazing action-packed third act, and then a travel story in between. And I think that this would work as a movie, and I think it would be great. But like I said, there are some significant pacing issues, especially in that middle half, and I struggled to read this. So I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to go with the 3. I think this is a good book. I would recommend this book, especially for like a D&D player who understands like the way like the domains of gods work and that kind of stuff. I think it really fits into that kind of a person. So I found this book to be good, but it leaves a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said it reads like a cinematic, because like I said, it wasn't till the moment when I pictured one of the main characters as Bella Ramsey from Game of Thrones and like Kissen as the Hound that it clicked. And I could picture them wandering almost like the moors, if you will, like kind of Irish scenes and going through that and just visually playing this in my mind. And it was actually written almost episodic. I could see this being like an 8-part series on Netflix or like Amazon Prime, because each chapter was from a different point of view as well. We didn't mention that earlier, but we have chapters from Skedi, the god. We have it from Elo and Kissen and Inara. And it was so interesting that way that I feel like if I would actually look ahead to see what the next chapter would be. and I would choose if I was going to read further, not because I didn't like that chapter, because I actually liked all the point of views, but just because I like knew that that would reset it mentally in my mind. Like, if that makes sense, because I was kind of just visually going along with this. And if I wasn't ready for that episode, like, am I going to watch another episode tonight? Then I didn't read it.
Because even like the very end of this book, the last paragraph of this book reads like something right out of the finale of a movie. It's the stinger right at the end, or the post credits. Like that's the way it reads. And I think it'd be really good. I if this was picked up, I would be excited to watch this movie. Now, before we close out today, we just wanted to introduce my book pick for next month, and that is Ferryman by Justin Cronin. This is a sci-fi, utopian, or dystopian novel. I think it's going to take a similar type of vein as maybe Scythe. I'm excited about this one. I think it's going to be a pretty cool book.
You know, I read the back cover and I looked at the pictures on it, and I don't know why, but I'm getting like What Dreams May Come kind of vibes.
Okay.
So,
but yeah,
we'll see if that property aligns. Yeah.
But the ferryman concept is basically a guy, and it's his job to escort people to the afterlife, because I think in this world, everyone is functionally immortal. Once again, kind of gives you almost like the vibes of Scythe. So we'll have to see how this one goes, but I think this is going to be a cool book. I've been seeing it everywhere in many different bookstores. So I think it'll be a good one.
All right. Well, I'm excited for that one, but make sure to, first subscribe so that you know to tune in next week, because Rob's going to have a solo episode, and then we are going to cover the Rag Picker King, all before we get to Rob's book, The Ferryman. So thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.